Hi, guys, and welcome to another 7 minute lecture. The myth of Alexander the Great's great success in India. That's what we're looking at today. So, as most of you know, Alexander the Great is credited as being one of the greatest conquerors in human history, one of the greatest military generals of all time, blah, blah. And while I'm certainly not here to debunk the overall narrative, in fact, I do believe that he's one of the most successful conquerors of all time. There's also a lot of nonsense about him in the historical record, the most jarring of which is this claim that he somehow enjoyed great military success in India. Because while it's true that he had some military success against the Indians, today's lecture is about the misconceptions in this story. You find many historians claiming, for example, that Alexander defeated this great king of India called Porus. There are two problems with this claim. The first is that Porus was not some mighty king, he was a regional warlord at best. The primary kingdom in North India alone at that time was the Nanda Empire, and Porus was just one of the tiny chieftains in the Punjab region on the far outskirts of the Nanda Empire. Anyone who knows Indian history would know this. But unfortunately, most Western historians and scholars don't really know much about Indian history, right? Everything they know about India, particularly during this period, comes from Greek historians who always played up the role of Porus to make Alexander's victory over him seem far more important and impressive than what it actually was. Because Porus's kingdom, as I was saying, was tiny compared to the interior Indian kingdoms. And this brings me to the second problem, which is that the Greek historians who covered this are some of the most obvious and brazen liars whom you could read, even by the standards of ancient historians, all of whom exaggerate anyway. So, taking the word of these guys for anything is an extreme leap of faith. For example, look at what a historian like Arian says about the Gaugamela battle. Arian, for those of you who don't know, is an ancient Greek historian who to this day is considered the major historical source of Alexander's military campaigns. And the Gaugamela battle is the biggest battle Alexander fought against the Persian empires before he made it all the way to India. So Aryan says that during this Gaugamela battle, the Persians lost about 300,000 men and that Alexander lost 100. Not 100,000, just 100. This is how ridiculous Greek historians are. And the fact that anyone can believe that two ancient armies can meet each other in a battlefield where one side loses 300,000 and another loses just 100 people, the fact that people still believe that blows my mind. Take another ancient Greek historian like Diodorus, for example, and he's nearly as bad. He says that about 100,000 Persians died and Alexander lost less than 500 men, which is not as ridiculous, but still silly enough for even a child to laugh at. And these two, Arian and Diodorus, are essentially the two ancient Greek historians through whom we know 90% of what's considered as fact about Alexander's military genius, particularly in Asia. So, almost everything we know about Alexander's military prowess in the East comes from these two extremely dubious sources. What I do find interesting, though, is that when these two historians cover the Hydaspes battle in modern day Punjab, which is the battle where Alexander fought Porus, they both give much larger numbers of Greek casualties than they did for the Persians, even though it's still unbelievable. Arian says that Alexander lost about 300 men, while Diodorus says that he lost about 1,000 men. And this really is testament to just how strong the Indian kingdoms were considered by Western historians at the time. The fact that even these two guys say Alexander lost only 100 men in his biggest battle against the Persians, but he lost 1,000 men against this small time warlord called Porus, who was inconsequential to the Nanda Empire. That says a lot about how strong India was considered at that time. And that brings me to the next misconception, which I see Western historians make when they say that had Alexander continued his journey, he would have made a big mark on India. That the only reason his unstoppable march had to be stopped was because his army revolted, and that if he didn't have to turn back, he could have beat his way further in, which is even more insulting. I mean, come on. He was barely able to defeat Porus himself. In fact, if it wasn't for the weather and if it wasn't for the horse archers gifted to him by his father in law, Roxana's father, Alexander would have been smashed even by Porus. Because when Alexander tried to stage a stealthy crossing to surprise Porus, they were discovered instantly by Porus's son the moment they set foot on that bank. It was the horse archers who took out Porus's son and the scouting party and gave Alexander time to get into formation before the main force, along with Porus, could arrive. So, this supposedly great military tactic that historians still praise Alexander for was nothing more than a clumsy and botched amphibious operation which was saved because of the Persian horse archers. The Greeks and their expertise had nothing to do with it. Incidentally, horse archers in general have always been the Achilles heel of Indian empires. For the next 2000 years, India would repeatedly get defeated by the superior horses of the Ghoris, the Ghaznis, the Mughals, blah blah. So all these accolades Alexander gets for outflanking Porus and being stealthy and all that is complete nonsense. Without the horse archers, as I was saying, he would have never been able to beat Porus. And it was the weather that actually saved him on top of these archers. As all historians have noted, both Greek historians and Indian historians, it had rained heavily just before the battle, which completely negated Porus's ability to fight at long range. Because if you read someone like Herodotus, where he describes Indian mercenaries fighting for the Persian empires, he talks about how they all carry these huge bows which had to be firmly planted on the ground before you could pull and shoot. And during this battle between Alexander and Porus, the thunderstorm before the fight ensured that these archers did not have firm ground to support their bows. And Alexander, using his superior cavalry, was able to close the distance immediately. That's how he won. So defeating even Porus was only possible because of incredible strokes of luck to do with the weather and to do with gifts that he received. And claiming that Alexander could have invaded India proper just because he defeated Porus is kind of like someone saying that you can defeat the United States in a war simply because you've defeated Cuba or Jamaica through a fluke. None of this, of course, negates the fact that Alexander was a great conqueror who crossed over from the Western Hemisphere and enjoyed a lot of success in the East, particularly against the Persians. It's just that his success in India is very vastly overrated by modern historians, and the little success that he did enjoy was because of good fortune. And look, luck is nothing to be ashamed of, right? Especially in battle. As Napoleon himself would say 2000 years later, when someone kept praising a general to him and kept praising this general's courage and intelligence and tactical prowess and all that, Napoleon apparently said, yes, yes, all that's fine, but is he lucky? Because as most students of war eventually realize, the real difference between someone remembered as a great general and someone whom history forgets is usually not military genius or courage. It's almost always that simple thing known as luck. And in that sense, one could say that Alexander was a great general against Porus because he was lucky. If you like content like this, please don't forget to share and subscribe. Thank you, take care, and I'll see you soon.